The air inside the courtroom felt heavy, like everyone was holding their breath at once. Robyn had just finished her testimony, her voice trembling as she tried to shield Kody from the harsh spotlight. She lowered her eyes, stepped down from the witness stand, and quietly returned to her seat beside him. For a fleeting moment, Kody leaned back with the look of a man who thought he had won a small victory. You could almost see the relief wash over him, his shoulders loosening just a little, as if Robyn's words had been enough to patch over the cracks. But the room told a different story. Across the benches, whispers rippled like a current. Reporters scribbled notes, Christine and Janelle exchanged subtle glances, and the judge's stern expression never softened. The silence that followed Robyn's testimony wasn't one of respect. It was the silence of doubt. It was as if everyone in that room knew that Kody's moment of ease was about to crumble, that this fragile relief was only the calm before the storm. The tension grew thicker with every second, and all eyes stayed fixed on Kody, waiting for what would come next. Hi friends, I'm Sophia, and this is TLC's Sister Wives Daily. If you're new here, welcome, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a breakdown of the biggest moments from the show. And to those of you who've been following along, you know this is the part where things always take a turn. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Do you think Robyn's testimony really helped Kody, or did it just set him up for an even bigger collapse? The moment Robyn sat down beside Kody, the courtroom shifted in a way that words barely capture. Her testimony was over, but the aftershocks were still vibrating through the room. You could see it on people's faces, some biting their lips, some shaking their heads, others whispering in disbelief. The judge kept her expression calm, but there was a sharpness in her eyes, as if she was dissecting every detail of what had just been said. Kody, though, clung to Robyn's presence like a lifeline. He leaned toward her slightly, whispering something that looked more like desperation than confidence. For him, her words had been a shield. For everyone else, they were a performance. Christine sat still, her back straight, her eyes locked on Kody. You could tell she wasn't rattled. If anything, she looked stronger in that silence, almost like she had been here before, watching Kody try to control a narrative that was already slipping out of his hands. Janelle, too, sat with quiet composure. She didn't need to say a word. Her expression alone told the story of years of frustration, of watching Robyn step into the role of Kody's defender, no matter how messy the truth underneath might be. And then there were the murmurs from the gallery. Reporters quickly compared notes, knowing this testimony wasn't going to land as neatly as Kody hoped. Even some of the children who had come to watch looked conflicted. Their father's relief was obvious, but it wasn't mirrored in the room. It was almost painful to watch. Kody trying to soak in the comfort of one wife's loyalty, while the weight of doubt from everyone else pressed down harder. This wasn't new. Fans of Sister Wives have seen this dynamic before. Robyn has often stepped in to soften Kody's image, to justify decisions, or to redirect blame. Back in past seasons, when tension rose between Kody and Christine, or when Janelle dared to stand her ground, Robyn's voice was the one offering explanations and defending his actions. In that courtroom, it was the same pattern. Only now, the audience wasn't just the wives. It was a judge and an entire public waiting for truth, not excuses. And that's what made the air feel so thick. Everyone knew the shield couldn't hold forever. Kody sat there, shoulders drawn back, trying to convince himself the worst was behind him. For a few minutes, he even managed to keep a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth, as if Robyn's testimony had bought him breathing room. He nodded to himself, adjusted his jacket, and leaned toward his lawyers with the confidence of a man who thought the tide had shifted. But if you looked closer, you could see the truth. His hands fidgeted against the table, his jaw tightened whenever Christine's name was mentioned, and his eyes darted nervously across the courtroom. That fleeting sense of control was already slipping. This was Kody in a nutshell, grasping at the smallest glimmer of reassurance, convinced it would shield him from reality. Viewers who've followed Sister Wives for years have seen this pattern over and over again. Think back to the moments when Christine began to speak her truth. Instead of listening, Kody doubled down, convinced he could smooth things over with charm or control. Or when Janelle finally pushed back during their explosive arguments in later seasons, Kody responded with bluster, not reflection. Each time, he underestimated just how much strength the women around him had gathered. This courtroom was no different. As Kody leaned on Robyn, believing she had steadied the ship, he missed the subtle looks exchanged between Christine's team and Janelle's quiet confidence. The real battle hadn't even begun. The judge, a steady stare, gave nothing away, but the atmosphere in the room made it clear that Robyn's words had opened more doors than they had closed. Her loyalty to Kody might have soothed him, but it also spotlighted the exact dynamic that had driven the family apart. One wife standing by him while the others bore the weight of his choices. The relief Kody felt in that moment was almost tragic, because it wasn't built on solid ground. It was the kind of relief that comes from plugging a leak with your hand while the dam behind you is about to burst. The audience could see it. The children could sense it. And even Christine's quiet stillness hinted at it. Kody believed he had gained a small victory, but in truth, it was the setup for the collapse that was already on its way. The calm didn't last long. As Robyn settled back into her seat, the judge gave a nod, and Christine's attorney rose with a folder of notes in hand. The tone in the courtroom shifted instantly. This wasn't about emotion or loyalty anymore. This was about precision, facts, and holding testimony up against the weight of truth. The air felt sharper, like the first chill before a storm. Robyn's words had been spoken with devotion, but cross-examination doesn't bend to devotion. It bends to consistency. And that's where things began to crack. The lawyer started simply, revisiting Robyn's earlier statements. At first, her answers came smoothly, but with each new question, the pressure built. Did she remember exact dates? Could she verify details of certain conversations? Had she ever witnessed some of the arguments she claimed to describe? It wasn't long before her steady tone began to falter. She shifted in her seat, glanced toward Kody for reassurance, and adjusted her hands nervously in her lap. In that moment, it became clear. Loyalty might carry you through a family discussion at home, but in front of a juicy you-hand, loyalty without proof begins to look like avoidance. Viewers of Sister Wives have seen this before in subtler ways. Back when tensions ran high between Christine and Kody, Robyn often defended him, sometimes minimizing what the other wives were feeling. She'd step in to rationalize his actions, painting them in softer colors than Christine or Janelle ever experienced. On camera, that dynamic created friction. Off camera, it became a shield for Kody. But here, in court, the shield was being tested. Every time Robyn's memory wavered, every time her voice shook, the cracks widened. Christine's lawyer pressed further, asking about specific moments fans remember from past episodes. The holiday arguments, the division of time with the children, the explosive fights where Kody's temper overshadowed reason. When Robyn hesitated, the silence in the courtroom said everything. You could almost feel Christine and Janelle gaining strength with each pause, as if the truth they had lived was finally echoing through someone else's hesitation. Kody's reaction was impossible to miss. His earlier relief vanished. He leaned forward, whispering sharply to his lawyers, his face tight with frustration. Every time Robyn stumbled, it was like another piece of his armor fell away. This wasn't the polished family narrative he had always tried to present on camera. This was raw, exposed, and undercutting the very loyalty he had relied on for so long. By the end of the exchange, Robyn looked drained. Her loyalty was intact, but her credibility had taken hits she couldn't patch up. And in that courtroom, credibility was everything. The silence that followed wasn't protective anymore. It was damning. The so-called victory Kody thought he'd gained was unraveling right before his eyes. Kody's mask was slipping, and everyone in the room could see it. The man who had sat a little taller after Robyn's testimony now hunched forward, elbows pressing into the table, jaw clenched so tight it looked painful. His hands moved constantly, rubbing his face, tugging at his collar, tapping the desk as if he could beat out the nerves with rhythm. This wasn't confidence anymore. It was panic wrapped in anger. And for those who have followed his story on Sister Wives, The sight was hauntingly familiar. Think back to the later seasons when Christine finally told Kody she was done. He had lashed out, raising his voice, throwing accusations, calling her selfish for leaving. Or when Janelle confronted him about his treatment of the kids, and he exploded instead of listening. Under pressure, Kody has always turned defensive, convinced that if he pushes back hard enough, he can silence the truth. But here in the courtroom, the louder his body language screamed, the less power he actually had. The judge's eyes narrowed each time Kody muttered under his breath to his attorneys. The gallery caught every shake of his head, every glare he shot across the room. Even some of the children looked down, uncomfortable, as their father visibly unraveled. This wasn't just about testimony anymore. It was about credibility, composure, and respect, and Kody was losing all three in real time. Meanwhile, Christine and Janelle stayed remarkably composed. Christine sat tall, her hands folded neatly in her lap, her expression calm but resolute. It was the same strength viewers saw when she packed up her life and left Kody, not in anger, but in clarity. Janelle mirrored that quiet determination. She didn't need to raise her voice, didn't need to meet Kody's angry stares. Her silence was louder than any words she could have spoken. The more Kody squirmed, the more obvious it became that Robyn's testimony had only delayed the inevitable. The cross-examination had stripped away its shine, leaving Kody exposed. He wasn't the patriarch in control of his family anymore. He was a man on the defensive, watching the narrative he'd built over decades collapse under the weight of truth. The murmurs in the courtroom grew louder with each passing minute. Reporters scribbled furiously, sensing the headline, "Kody Brown breaking down under pressure." Fans of the show could almost predict it. This was the same cycle we had seen play out in living rooms and on camera, now magnified in front of a judge. His attempts to control the story were no match for the reality staring him down. By the time the gavel struck to pause proceedings, Kody looked worn out, his earlier relief a distant memory. He wasn't holding the room anymore. The room was holding him accountable, and that was the real collapse. Not a sudden crash, but a slow, undeniable unraveling that everyone present could feel. The silence after the gavel struck was deafening. It wasn't the kind of silence that brought peace. It was the kind that carries weight, a silence that says everything without a single word being spoken. Kody sat frozen, his face flushed, his hands still trembling against the table. For a man who once commanded a household of 4 wives and nearly 20 children, the sight was jarring. The authority he had clung to for so long seemed to vanish in that room, leaving behind only the raw image of someone who no longer had control. Christine didn't flinch. Her gaze stayed locked forward, steady and unshaken. To anyone watching, she radiated the same quiet strength that carried her through the hardest moments on the show, packing up her things, telling Kody she deserved better, choosing freedom for herself and her children. This wasn't vengeance. This was validation. For Christine, every word spoken in that courtroom, every pause that left Kody exposed, was proof that her years of struggle had not been in vain. Beside her, Janelle embodied calm resilience. She didn't smirk, didn't gloat, didn't even meet Kody's fiery eyes. She sat in silence, her composure almost a rebuke in itself. Janelle had always been measured, choosing her words carefully, standing her ground when she needed to, but not wasting energy on battles that weren't worth it. In that courtroom, her stillness spoke volumes. It was as if she no longer needed to convince anyone of the truth. It was unfolding right there for all to see. And then, there were the children. Their presence added a layer of emotion that no testimony could capture. Some looked down at their hands, uncomfortable with the unraveling of their father in front of strangers. Others exchanged subtle glances, expressions that carried both sadness and recognition. They had lived this dynamic at home, behind closed doors, long before it ever reached a courtroom. Now the world was seeing what they had already known. Kody's grip on control was always fragile, always at risk of breaking under pressure. The judge observed it all with a level gaze, but her silence carried more weight than any statement could. In her eyes, it wasn't just about legal arguments anymore. It was about credibility, about honesty, about who could be trusted when the stakes were this high. Robyn shifted uncomfortably beside Kody, her loyalty intact, but her testimony bruised. Even she seemed to realize that the story they had tried to build together wasn't landing the way they hoped. For fans who had followed Sister Wives from the beginning, this was more than just a courtroom scene. It was the collapse of an image Kody had worked tirelessly to protect. From patriarch to defendant, from confident husband to a man visibly shaken under pressure, the transformation was stark. The emotional fallout wasn't just in that courtroom. It rippled outward, through his family, through his children, and through every viewer who had watched this family's story play out for over a decade. The collapse wasn't loud. It wasn't explosive. It was the kind that breaks you slowly, piece by piece, until there's nothing left to cling to. And for Kody Brown, that was the moment his authority, his credibility, and his family's trust slipped further than ever before. The gavel echoed once more, signaling the end of the day's proceedings, but the weight in the courtroom didn't lift. If anything, it grew heavier. Everyone knew this wasn't over, not for the court, not for the Browns, and certainly not for Kody. He rose slowly, his movements stiff, almost robotic. The fragile confidence he carried into the morning had long since drained away, leaving him a shadow of the man he once presented to the world. Reporters in the gallery leaned forward, pens scratching furiously, knowing they had just witnessed a moment that would headline across every outlet. Christine stood with quiet dignity. There was no triumph in her expression, no smugness in her posture. What radiated from her was relief, not just for herself, but for the truth finally piercing through the fog Kody had cultivated for years. Janelle joined her, and together they walked out with calm assurance, the kind that comes from knowing they no longer had to fight for anyone to believe their story. The courtroom had done that for them. Robyn, however, stayed close to Kody, her face etched with worry. The loyalty was still there, unbroken, but it looked more fragile than ever. She glanced around the room, as if searching for a sign that their side of the story hadn't completely unraveled. But the silence from the gallery, the judge's stern gaze, and Kody's unraveling demeanor told her what she didn't want to admit. The narrative was slipping beyond repair. Hi, I'm Sophia, and this is TLC's Sister Wives Daily. Today's courtroom drama revealed more than just testimony. It showed us the cracks in Kody's control and the strength of Christine and Janelle's resolve. What do you think? Was this the moment Kody finally lost the grip he's fought so hard to maintain? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your take. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss a breakdown of the latest Sister Wives drama. This story is far from over, and trust me, you'll want to be here when the next chapter unfolds.